Well, welcome everybody. We have a fascinating program for you today. You need to stay here for the whole bit of it because we're going to be talking about communicating with this ultimate source of wisdom, with the unseen therapist. Literally, we're going to be talking about ways with some seasoned experts here about how to talk with God, and that's all part of our advanced training. It's also, part of that is given to you in my book, The Unseen Therapist, and so on. And these communications are not only with therapeutic questions like, gee, what's behind my issue with whatever ailment it may be, but also everyday questions like, should I turn right or should I turn left? I'm lost. What now? Should I buy these peaches or those bananas? I mean, how would I respond when this person says so-and-so to me in a conversation? Okay. All of that, we can tune in. We can communicate with unseen therapists once you've done it well. And that's where our seasoned experts are going to come in to show you how in many, many, many different ways. And it will make a major change. So stay here till the end. I don't even know how long it's going to be because we have a lot to cover here, but there are so many ways to do this and so many things going on and so many opportunities you don't want to miss any of them. So let me bring everybody on. I hope I do this right. There we are. Okay, so you may or may not be able to read their names. So Nami, would you raise your hand? There's Nami and Anne. All right, and Marion.
Oh.
And Mary. Okay. They have been students of the Unseen Therapist in our Optimal EFT course for years, and they have developed their various ways of doing all this. I want to start off myself, but they're going to do most of the talking here. But I want to give you an idea first about how everybody who gets involved and starts walking up our stairway to miracles with the Unseen Therapist and reads my book and so on is already learning how to communicate with the Unseen Therapist. Example, in the book, at the end, there's something called the personal peace procedure. It's an introductory way of taking a specific event that's bothersome to you, handing it to the Unseen Therapist, and getting some resolution. And even though it's an intro version of that, many people start getting results. So, for example, you have some memory with an abusive parent, let's say, when you were age 6 or something like that. Still bothers you now when you think about it. All right. Personal peace procedure has you hand that over to Unseen Therapist in ways that are described. And then you let Unseen Therapist work with it. And afterwards, you see whether or not you got improvement. You may have gone from an 8 intensity on a 0 to 10 scale to, let's say, a 3 or a 2 or a 0 or something. Whatever that was, it's important to recognize you just communicated with the spiritual dimension. You just talked to God. You talked to the Unseen Therapist. It wasn't done over the breakfast table where, you're talking in English or, pass the bacon or that kind of thing, okay? It comes about in different ways. Different versions of communication. But in that case, you just communicate. You asked Unseen Therapist, here's my issue that I'm still worried about or worked up about. Hand it over to you. Here's the result. You asked, got a result. That is a communication. It's a beginning one for us, but it's very important. So with that in mind, that's one example. I know the rest of you guys have lots of examples, but Marion, why don't you kick it off for now, and let's just get the ball rolling.
Okay, be happy to. So the first point I just wanted to make is that the Unseen Therapist communicates with different people in different ways. We all have different modalities at which we get information. So some of us are more visual and we're more likely to see an image. Some of us are more likely to hear things. So just notice about yourself how you usually get information. And sometimes you'll get information in more than one way from the Unseen Therapist. I know for me, I get in all ways, but I'm primarily visual and I'll hear words. But again, everybody's different. And so you have to look out for the ways that you get your information. So the first way I was thinking is that for me, it's often visual. And as Gary said before, that it can be for the most everyday, mundane things that you might ask a question of the unseen therapist. For instance, not that long ago, I was having a conversation with Gary after I had been sick and very nauseous and I couldn't eat. And I finally gained my appetite back. And he said, "What do you want to eat?" And he mentioned a few things that clearly were not what I wanted to eat. So I tuned in with the unseen therapist, and an image of a pear came into my mind, and I could almost taste the pear. Now, I don't know what it was about that particular fruit that it came to my mind, but it was clearly what my body needed. And I knew it the moment that image came in my mind. So it's something very concrete, very simple. But sometimes it could be something more abstract. Like, for instance, I was working with a woman who I had never met before. She was coming in for the first time. I didn't know anything about her. And sometimes I will tune in with the unseen therapist before I see someone for the first time and ask, is there something I need to know about this person? And very often I get a visual image. And in this case, it was an image of a red rose. I had no idea what it meant, but I knew from experience that it was going to be meaningful. So the woman came in, she was very shy, very withdrawn. She could barely make eye contact with me. And she certainly didn't seem like a beautiful rose. So listening to her story, I began to hear that she had grown up homeless, living in homeless shelters with her parents. And it was a very difficult life. And as she was talking, the image of the rose started to change in my mind to a rose growing in a very weeded, vacant lot. And it became clear to me that this woman had the potential to blossom despite what she'd gone through. And that, in fact, is what happened in the therapy. As we worked, she blossomed into this beautiful rose. Now, eventually, I probably would have realized that, but being cued into that the very first time I met her allowed me to gain information as to where to go with her and what we needed to do. And that was just wonderful. And that was a visual communication from the unseen therapist. So I'm sure there are other people who've had those kinds of experiences.
Anybody else?
Well, I think what I'd like to talk about is not just the type of experiences, but in the beginning, when you haven't had any experience, the kind of period of time where you're trying to connect, you want to believe that you can have a connection, but it's not working, or you doubt yourself or whatever. I personally, in the beginning, it was really, really difficult for me. I kind of thought of this. Yes, Gary?
Oh, sorry. I was just going to echo, Mary.
Ah.
What you just said is echoed by almost every newcomer, because it is so strange. It is so new. You mean you're going to talk to this woo-woo unseen therapist, and where is she? Well, she's in here. Well, I don't see her. I mean, where is she? So now we're talking about communicating with somebody. You don't even know what she looks like. Okay, because she doesn't look like anything. Okay, so we're actually communicating, but we're not aware of it often. And so it's what you're going to say, Mary, is so important, because just about everybody listening in, I'm guessing, okay, has doubts about this. And it does take experience. It does take practice. May I see nodded heads, ladies? Okay, before you get there, and that's what you're going to unfold here. So I'm sorry to interrupt, but please, Mary, go ahead.
No, it's fine. It's good you said that, because I think most people would be working on their own at home, trying to figure this out. Trying to understand what the connection would be, and plus, most people have a lack of confidence starting something new. So that lack of confidence would come in and play the part of, the doubting Thomas and telling you you're not doing it correctly. And maybe you need to have lots more spiritual experience or maybe the loving connection or whatever must be much more important. So this can just prevent us from believing the messages that are coming in, you know. So
I'm sorry, Mary. The other thing that the other thing that happens, this is my experience, especially with newcomers, is they think this is not going to work unless there's a Hollywood moment involved. If I'm going to be speaking with the unseen therapist, I've got to get warm fuzzies. I've got to hear music. No, you just get a notion here sometimes. You get a feeling.
Yes.
And you eventually get used to, what that is. Anyway, sorry to interrupt again, but I wanted to emphasize
no,
that.
you're grand. The thing is, whether we get an image or we hear a voice, the first thing we're going to think is, well, I'm just thinking that, or that came from that movie I saw last night, or, you know, all the doubt's going to come in all the time. How am I going to know which voice or which image is actually the answer to the question that it posed, you know? So that was the biggest challenge for me in the beginning. And I'm sure most people have gone through the same thing, you know? And really, I know I'm always talking about groups, but really it was when I was working on my own, I had too many doubts. And it was when I started working with these fantastic people in groups and I saw how they spoke to the unseen therapist and the confidence that they had, that I realized, okay, well, here I have this space, this sacred space, the safe space where I can test it out. And I was really nervous in the beginning, you know, to say, well, I saw this strange image. Does that mean anything to you, the person whose question we were working on? And astonishingly, very often, more and more, it was actually meaningful to that person. So that boosted my confidence. I just wanted to state that in the beginning because the lack of confidence, the lack of practice means you have the lack of confidence. And the more you practice, you can't exactly practice that with clients if that's your only situation, because you don't want to mess up and you don't want to make a fool of yourself, or et cetera, et cetera. So the practice group is a fantastic place to practice, or practice with a friend. You know, it doesn't have to be a practice group if you're not in the optimal EFT community yet, or don't want to be, or whatever the reason is. But practice with someone who you can trust and who will take it lightly, whatever crazy image that you have come to you or whatever the message is, so that you can start getting a feel for it and start saying, okay, well, that worked, that didn't. In that place, it must have been the unseen therapist who was speaking to me. And in that place, it was just my crazy thoughts. And that builds your practice.
One of the things that you pointed out that I want to emphasize again is if you're a newcomer, particularly if you're a therapist or you're trying to do this with someone else and you don't have this confidence yet, and you get some kind of a notion or some kind of a message, but you didn't really know where you are and you don't want to look bad. Okay. When I was starting out doing this, I would get this notion. And I would just say to the client, I keep getting this notion that something about your sister, something about this,
which you'll see as we talk about it. Sometimes what you get is funny.
Yeah.
But it was
somebody was telling me the other day about this. Maybe it was one of you guys. Something about you were asking a question and you got nothing. And that was unusual. You just got a blank. And you end up saying, why do I get a blank? And the unseen therapist said, because you're not listening anyway.
me again.
Was that you?
There's her sense of humor.
Yeah.
And I could picture her in my mind. I could see a smile on her face. It wasn't a judgmental, you're not listening, but kind of like, well, you're not going to listen, so why should I answer you?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, that's just telling us our ego is in place and not listening today. Okay. And that's a good message, by the way.
Yes.
You know.
It disarmed the ego.
Yeah. Yeah.
Another thought, I'm just thinking in terms of communicating, it's often, well, my experience was it's often easier at the beginning and even as time goes by to do it on behalf of someone else. I got much more proficient at that before I was really able to listen for myself. Now that may not be everybody's case, but I wonder if sometimes that's where people's lack of self-belief or irritation comes in, or frustration that like I keep trying this and I can't get anything. I mean, I think we've all probably heard that I can't get anything. And definitely doing it on behalf of someone else, not someone we're kind of deeply attached to the outcome of whatever it is. I mean, if we're very triggered by something going on with someone else, that's a bit like doing it for ourselves. But if we're doing it on behalf of someone we just kind of pair up with, or we know so-and-so's got something on and we just say, well, I've nothing to lose. I found for me, I was able to hear or see or whatever the unseen therapist communication for other people a lot clearer, a lot more that I could trust it, just a lot easier, full stop. And my own, communication with her in terms of really trusting it and really hearing her has developed over time. And even with my own one, when I'm just having a general, I wonder what I need to know about, I hear it. If I'm really activated about something, again, it's like if I'm really, I need to know, my God, this is just terrible. Again, it's like very, very hard. So what I need to do then is say, I'm really activated, like help calm me down first, because I'm not going to be able to hear you or anybody else.
Yeah.
That brings me to something, Anne, because I know you wrote to me something. You do something with it when you write. Okay, but I want to give a little intro to that first. There's such a thing known as automatic writing, and some people are able to do that. They just sit there and start writing, and unseen therapists, God, higher power, or whatever they're tuning into, whatever they call it, they'll start writing out some stuff. People even write out perfect poetry sometimes. Okay. I don't have the skill to do that, or I shouldn't say it differently. I have not yet developed the skill to do that. Important way to word that. Okay. What I do from time to time is I enjoy writing poetry, and it'll put it on my website newsletter once in a while and so on. But when I do it, it comes very easy to me, especially when there's spiritual topics. It's not perfect, but the rhythm comes. I may have to look up a rhyming word or two, but it flows pretty well. I go back over it, and I get done much faster than you would ordinarily think a poem would be. Well, does this rhyme with that? And how about this cadence? And it just flows. It just shows up that way. Okay. So that's not what you call automatic writing, but I think there's some spiritual stuff behind that guiding me to write it with whatever skills I've developed. Now you, Anne, do something a little different still. Talk about that, could you?
Yeah. So when I was first communicating with the unseen therapist, I would do it on behalf of, particularly if I was doing it on behalf of someone else, close my eyes, whatever would happen. I'd open my eyes and, make a few notes, because before I forget it, I want to be able to tell somebody. Somewhere along the line, without me noticing, what changed was when I would say, Leo, let's close our eyes, connect to loving moment, let's go in with the unseen therapist. I would pick up the pen and I will end up with maybe a page or two written by the time that other person opens their eyes. And I mean, obviously I move the pen, but what comes through it completely comes from her, completely.